You're quite an amazing human being. No matter what your mind may think and tell you every now and then. You're doing great. Things are going to be great. And you'll do great. Right, just figured I'd start it off on that. Why not? I've got no clue. I'm not really proficient at positive affirmations, but just tell people when you're one either, right? It's probably a pretty solid strategy for them. Probably, I'd presume. If you'll, maybe. Anyways, there's 3 elements, and that probably means there's good, but I'm too far behind. Let me see. I'm not gonna give too much a recap of the story. I'm just gonna be reading, and in the end, I'm pretty sure my reading voice a lot of people don't understand anyways. So it's just some random inaudible noise to a lot. Which is plenty fine with me, to be honest. As long as people are relaxing and nice and chill. And good that I'm remembering this. One thing I had not done yet, put my phone on silent. Let me see, yeah, there you go, that's a good board as well. I had some problems earlier today for some other people I saw, but or well, sometimes music just doesn't like putting out messages. Wait, let me double check. I looked at Twitter on my phone, but did I turn off notifications? Yes, I did. Good going. Did I actually do what I grabbed my phone for? Yes, I did. It's alright, I think maybe just do a standard 5-ish minutes before starting the book. Hope everyone's doing great. Had a bit of a week just for relaxing this week. Just relieving some stress from work, just not doing all that much. Hello there, Jeff, right, Jeff. Hope you're doing well. Good day, good day. Could almost say I've had a bit of a lazy week. Kind of needed the time off of other things. It was a good week for me at least. Anyways. I hope you all had just as amazing a week this week. Actually, I've been thinking a bit about learning a bit of singing lately, but I'm terrible at it. When you're like terrible at singing, it's kind of like, do I really want to start it? Like, sure, maybe to get better, but you have to bear through your own singing for a while first as well. It takes some willpower to do that, sometimes. Anyhow, let me just get on started back in the Reading Pride and Prejudice. It's been a while. I read the earlier chapters during last weekend's Valentine's kind of special streams that I did, and I wanted to finish that weekend. But in the end, I didn't have enough time that weekend, no streams. So, well, we're gonna be finishing it today, I hope. Should have enough time, to be honest. Don't ramble on too much. So let me jump into chapter 55. A few days after this visit, Mr. Bingley called again, and alone. His friend had left him that morning for London, but was to return home in 10 days' time. He sat with him above an hour, and was in remarkably good spirits. Mrs. Bennet invited him to dine with them, but with many expressions of concern, he confessed himself engaged elsewhere. "Next time you call," said she, "I hope we shall be more lucky." He should be particularly happy at any time, etc., etc., and if she would give him a chance, would take an early opportunity of waiting on them. "Can you come tomorrow?" Yes, he had no engagement at all for tomorrow, and her invitation was accepted with alacrity. He came, and in such very good time that the ladies were none of them dressed. In ran Mrs. Bennet to her daughter's room in her dressing gown, and with her hair half finished, crying out, "My dear Jane, make haste and hurry down. He is come, Mr. Bingley is come, he is indeed. Make haste, make haste. Here, Sarah, come to Miss Bennet this moment, and help her on with her gown. Never mind Miss Lizzie's hair." "We will be down as soon as we can," said Jane, "but I dare say Kitty is forwarder than either of us, for she went upstairs half an hour ago." "Oh, hang Kitty, what has she to do with it? Come, be quick, be quick. Where is your sash, my dear?" But when her mother was gone, Jane would not be prevailed on to go down without any one of her sisters. The same anxiety to get them by themselves was visible again in the evening. After tea, Mr. Bennet retired to the library, as was his custom, and Mary went upstairs to her instrument. 2 obstacles of the 5 being thus removed, Mrs. Bennet sat looking and winking at Elizabeth and Catherine for a considerable time, without making any impression on them. Elizabeth would not observe her, and when at last Kitty did, she very innocently said, "What is the matter, mamma? What do you keep winking at me for? What am I to do?" "Nothing, child, nothing. I did not wink at you." She then sat still 5 minutes longer, but unable to waste such a precious occasion. She suddenly got up, and saying to Kitty, "Come here, my love, I want to speak to you," took her out of the room. Jane instantly gave a look at Elizabeth, which spoke her distress at such premeditation, and her entreaty that she would not give in to it. In a few minutes, Mrs. Bennet half opened the door, and called out, "Lizzie, my dear, I want to speak with you." Elizabeth was forced to go. "We may as well leave them by themselves, you know." "We may as well leave them by themselves, you know," said her mother as soon as she was in the hall. "Kitty and I are going upstairs to sit in my dressing room." Elizabeth made no attempt to reason with her mother, but remained quietly in the hall till she and Kitty were out of sight, then returned into the drawing room. Mrs. Bennet's schemes for this day were ineffectual. Bingley was everything that was charming, except the professed lover of her daughter. His ease and cheerfulness rendered him a most agreeable addition to their evening party, and he bore with the ill-judgment officiousness of the mother, and heard all her silly remarks with a forbearance and command of countenance, particularly grateful to the daughter. He scarcely needed an invitation to stay supper, and before he went away, an engagement was formed, chiefly through his own and Mrs. Bennet's means, for his coming next morning to shoot with her husband. After this day, Jane said no more of her indifference. Not a word passed between the sisters concerning Bingley, but Elizabeth went to bed in the happy belief that all must speedily be concluded, unless Mr. Darcy returned within the stated time. Seriously, however, she felt tolerably persuaded that all this must have taken place with a gentleman's concurrence. Bingley was punctual to his appointment, and he and Mr. Bennet spent the morning together, as had been agreed on. The latter was much more agreeable than his companion expected. There was nothing of presumption or folly in Bingley that could provoke his ridicule, or disgust him into silence, and he was more communicative and less eccentric than the other had ever seen him. Bingley, of course, returned with him to dinner, and in the evening Mrs. Bennet's invention was again at work to get everybody away from him and their daughter. Elizabeth, who had a letter to write, went into the back breakfast room for that purpose soon after tea, for as the others were all going to sit down to cards, she could not be wanted to counteract her mother's schemes. But on returning to the drawing-room, when her letter was finished, she saw, to her infinite surprise, there was reason to fear that her mother had been too ingenious for her. On opening the door, she perceived her sister and Bingley standing together over the hearth, as if engaged in earnest conversation, and had this led to no suspicion the faces of both, as they hastily turned round and moved away from each other, would have told it all. Their situation was awkward enough, but hers, she thought, was still worse. Not a syllable was uttered by either, and Elizabeth was on the point of going away again, when Bingley, who as well as the other had sat down, suddenly rose, and whispering a few words to her sister, ran out of the room. Jane could have no reserves from Elizabeth, where confidence would give pleasure, and instantly embracing her, acknowledged, with the liveliest emotion, that she was the happiest creature in the world. "'Tis too much," she added, "by far too much. I do not deserve it. Oh, why is not everybody as happy?" Elizabeth's congratulations were given with a sincerity, a warmth, a delight, which words could but poorly express. Every sentence of kindness was a fresh source of happiness to Jane, but she would not allow herself to stay with her sister or say all that remained to be said for the present. "I must go instantly to my mother," she cried. "I would not on any account trifle with her affectionate solicitude, or allow to hear it from anyone but myself. He has gone to my father already. Oh, Lizzie, to know that what I have to relate will give such pleasure to all my dear family. How shall I bear so much happiness?" She then hastened away to her mother, who had purposely broken up the card party and was sitting upstairs with Kitty. Elizabeth, who was left by herself, now smiled at the rapidity and ease with which an affair was finally settled, that had given them so many previous months of suspense and vexation. "And this," said she, "is the end of all this friend's anxious circumspection, of all his sister's falsehood and contrivance, the happiest, wisest, most reasonable end." In a few minutes she was joined by Bingley, whose conference with her father had been short and to the purpose. "Where is your sister?" said he hastily as he opened the door. "With my mother upstairs. She will be down in a moment, I dare say." He then shut the door, and coming up to her, claimed the good wishes and affection of a sister. Elizabeth honestly and heartily expressed her delight in the prospect of their relationship. They shook hands with great cordiality, and then till her sister came down, she had to listen to all he had to say, of his own happiness and of Jane's perfections, and in spite of his being a lover, Elizabeth really believed all his expectations of felicity to be rationally founded, because they had for basis the excellent understanding and super-excellent disposition of Jane, and a general similarity of feeling and taste between her and themselves. 'Twas an evening of no common delight to them all. The satisfaction of Miss Bennet's mind gave a glow of such sweet animation to her face as made her look handsomer than ever. Kitty simpered and smiled and hoped her turn was coming soon. Mrs. Bennet could not give her consent or speak her approbation in terms warm enough to satisfy her feelings, though she talked to Bingley of nothing else for half an hour, and when Mr. Bennet joined them at supper, his voice and manner plainly showed how really happy he was. Not a word, however, passed his lips in allusion to it, till their visitor took his leave for a night, but as soon as he was gone he turned to his daughter and said, "Jane, I congratulate you. You will be a very happy woman." Jane went to him instantly, kissed him, and thanked him for his goodness. "You are a good girl," he replied, "and I have great pleasure in thinking you will be so happily settled. I have not a doubt of your doing very well together. Your tempers are by no means unlike. You are each of you so complying that nothing will ever be resolved from, so easy that every servant will cheat you, and so generous that you will always exceed your income. I hope not so imprudence or thoughtlessness in money matters would be unpardonable in me." "Exceed their income, my dear Mr. Bennet," cried his wife. "What are you talking of? Why, he has 4,000 or 5,000 a year, and very likely more." Then addressing her daughter, "Oh, my dear, dear Jane, I am so happy, I am sure. I shan't get a wink of sleep at night. I knew how it would be. I always said it must be so. At last I was sure he would not be so beautiful for nothing. I remember as soon as I ever saw him, when he first came into Hertfordshire last year, I thought how likely it was that you should come together. Oh, he is the handsomest young man that ever was seen." Wickham, Lydia were unforgotten. Jane was beyond competition her favourite child. At that moment she cared for no other. Her younger sister soon began to make interest with her for objects of happiness, which she might in future be able to dispense. Mary petitioned for the use of the library at Netherfield, and Kitty begged very hard for a few balls there every winter. Bingley from this time was of course a daily visitor at Longbourn, coming frequently before breakfast, and always remaining till after supper, unless when some barbarous neighbour, who could not be enough detested, had given him an invitation to dinner, which he thought himself obliged to accept. Elizabeth had now but little time for conversation with her sister, for while he was present, Jane had no intention to bestow on anyone else, but she found herself considerably useful to both of them in those hours of separation that must sometimes occur. In the absence of Jane, he always attached himself to Elizabeth for the pleasure of talking of her, and when Bingley was gone, Jane constantly sought the same means of relief. He has made me so happy," said she one evening, "by telling me that he was totally ignorant of me being in town last spring. I had not believed it possible." "I suspected as much," replied Elizabeth, "but how did he account for it?" "It must have been his sister's doing. They were certainly no friends to his acquaintance with me, which I cannot wonder at, since he might have chosen so much more advantageously in many respects. But when they see, as I trust they will, that our brother is very happy with me, they will learn to be contented, and we shall be on good terms again, though we can never be what we once were to each other." "That is the most unforgiving speech," said Elizabeth, "that I ever heard you utter. Good girl, it would vex me indeed to see you again the Duke with Miss Bingley's pretended regard. Would you believe it, Lizzie, that when he went to town last November, he really loved me, and nothing but a persuasion of my being indifferent would have prevented his coming down again. He made a little mistake, to be sure, but it is the credit of his modesty. Hello, Larendica, hope you're doing well. Good day to you." And well, not much here, not much. Just chilling. Just finally finishing up Pride and Prejudice. I really, really wanted and had the motivation to finish it close to the weekend, like Monday, after I couldn't finish it that weekend. But I ended up a bit time pressed, a bit busy with work, and decided the most wise decision would be for me to just chill after work the last couple of work days. And it has been great stress relief, just taking some time to chill. But hey, now we got that behind us. We're back to just chilling with Pride and Prejudice again, and back to streaming a bit. Anyhow, this naturally introduced a panegyric from Jane on his difference, and the little value he put on his own good qualities. Elizabeth was pleased to find that he had not betrayed the interference of his friend, for though Jane had the most generous and forgiving heart in the world, she knew it was a circumstance which must prejudice her against him. "It's a bit early, it's getting pretty late there. It's nearing 6 p.m. for me. You see, I can't really even think of a place that'd be like it being early right now. Because the US should be getting well on their way to the afternoon by now. Except for the East Coast, it's still about 3 hours, 4 hours till the afternoon. But not really Australia and the like either, right? It should be more late. Anyhow, I am certainly the most fortunate creature that ever existed, cried Jane. Oh, Lizzie, why am I thus singled from my family, and blessed above them all? If I could but see you as happy, if there were but such another man for you. If you were to give me 40 such men, I never could be so happy as you, till I have your disposition, your goodness. I never can have your happiness. No, no, let me shift for myself, and perhaps, if I have very good luck, I may meet with another Mr. Collins in time. The situation of affairs in the Longbourn family could not be long a secret. Mrs. Bennet was privileged to whisper it to Mrs. Phillips, and she ventured without any permission to do the same by all her neighbours in Meryton. The Bennets were speedily pronounced to be the luckiest family in the world, though only a few weeks before, when Lydia had first run away, they had been generally proved to be marked out for misfortune. Alright, quick break in between chapters. Hope you're all nicely starting your weekend soon. It is Friday after all, the entire work week is upon us. For most, at least, I hope. And I hope we can just chill and relax into the weekend. And alright. Chapter 56. One morning, about a week after Bingley's engagement with Jane had been formed, as he and the female of the family were sitting together in the dining room, their attention was suddenly drawn to the window by the sound of a carriage, and they perceived a chaise and four driving up the lawn. 'Twas too early in the morning for visitors, and besides the equipage, neither the carriage nor the livery of the servant who preceded it were familiar to them, as it was certain, however, that somebody was coming. Bingley instantly prevailed on Miss Bennet to avoid the confinement of such an intrusion, and walk away with him into the shrubbery. They both set off, and the conjectures of the remaining three continued, though with little satisfaction, till the door was thrown open, and their visitors entered. It was Lady Catherine de Bourgh. They were of course all intending to be surprised, but their astonishment was beyond their expectation, and on the part of Mrs. Bennet and Kitty, though she was perfectly unknown to them, even inferior to what Elizabeth felt. She entered the room with an air more than usually ungracious, made no other reply to Elizabeth's salutation than a slight inclination of the head, and sat down without saying a word. Elizabeth had mentioned her name to her mother on her ladyship's entrance, though no request of introduction had been made. Enjoy the lyric, J.D. Take care, take care. Have a nice lyric. Mrs. Bennet, all amazement, though flattered by having a guest of such high importance, received her with the utmost politeness. After sitting for a moment in silence, she said very stiffly to Elizabeth, "I hope you are well, Miss Bennet. That lady, I suppose, is your mother." Elizabeth replied very concisely that she was. "And that, I suppose, is one of your sisters?" "Yes, madam," said Mrs. Bennet, delighted to speak to a Lady Catherine. "She is my youngest girl but one, My youngest of all is lately married, and my eldest is somewhere about the grounds, walking with a young man who I believe will soon become a part of the family. You have a very small park here, returned Lady Catherine after a short silence. It is nothing in comparison of Rosings, my lady, I dare say, but I assure you it is much larger than Sir William Lucas. This must be a convenient setting room for the evening, or inconvenient one, madame. In the summer, the windows are full west. Mrs. Bennet assured her that I never sat there after dinner, and then added, "May I take the liberty of asking your ladyship? May I take the liberty of asking your ladyship whether you left Mr. and Mrs. Collins well?" "Yes, very well. I saw them the night before last." Elizabeth now expected that she would produce a letter for her from Charlotte, as it seemed the only probable motive for her calling, but no letter appeared, and she was completely puzzled. Mrs. Bennet, with great civility, begged her ladyship to take some refreshment, but Lady Catherine very resolutely, and not very politely, declined eating anything, and then, rising up, said to Elizabeth, "Miss Bennet, there seemed to be a prettyish kind of lead wilderness on one side of your lawn. I should be glad to take a turn in it, if you will favour me with your company." "Go, my dear," cried her mother, "and show her ladyship about the different walks. I think she will be pleased with the heritage." Elizabeth obeyed, and running into her own room for her parasol, attended her noble guest downstairs. As they passed through the hall, Lady Catherine opened the doors into the dining parlour and drawing room, and pronouncing them after a short survey to be decent-looking rooms, walked on. Her carriage remained at the door, and Elizabeth saw that her waiting woman was in it. They proceeded in silence along the gravel walk that led to the copse. Elizabeth was determined to make no effort for conversation with the woman, who was now more than usually insolent and disagreeable. "How could I ever think her like her nephew?" said she as she looked in her face. As soon as they entered the copse, Lady Catherine began in the following manner. "You can be at no loss, Miss Bennet, to understand the reason of my journey hither. Your own heart, your own conscience, must tell you why I came." Elizabeth looked with unaffected astonishment. "Indeed you are mistaken, madam. I have not been at all able to account for the honour of seeing you here." "Miss Bennet," replied her ladyship in an angry tone, "you ought to know that I am not to be trifled with, but however insincere you may choose to be, you shall not find me so. My character has ever been celebrated for its sincerity and frankness, and in a case of such moment as this, I shall certainly not depart from it. A report of a most alarming nature reached me 2 days ago. I was told that not only your sister was on the point of being most advantageously married, but that you and Miss Elizabeth Bennet would in all likelihood be soon afterwards united to my nephew, my own nephew, Mr. Darcy. Though I know it must be a scandalous falsehood, though I would not injure him so much as to suppose the truth of it possible, I instantly resolved on setting off for this place, that I might make sentiments of my own known to you. If you believe it impossible to be true," said Elizabeth, colouring with astonishment and disdain, "I wonder you took the trouble of coming so far. What would your ladyship propose by it? At once to insist upon having such a report universally contradicted. You're coming to Longbourn to see me and my family, said Elizabeth coolly. Will be rather a confirmation of it, if indeed such a report is in existence. Hello there, miss. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well. Sleep well, sleep well. It's been going well, miss. Don't you worry. And hello, Pythons. Happy weekend to you all if you're nearing the weekend. It is Friday after all. If do you then pretend to be ignorant of it? Has it not been industriously circulated by yourself? Do you not know that such a report is spread abroad? I never heard that it was. And can you likewise declare that there is no foundation for it? I do not pretend to possess equal frankness with your ladyship. You may ask questions which I shall not choose to answer. This is not to be borne, Miss Bennet. I insist on being satisfied, as he, as my nephew, made you an offer of marriage. Your ladyship has declared it to be impossible. It ought to be so, it must be so, while he retains to use of his reason. But your arts and allurements may, in a moment of infatuation, have made him forget what he owes to himself and to all his family. You may have drawn him in. If I have, I shall be the last person to confess it. Miss Bennet, do you know who I am? I have not been accustomed to such language as this. I am almost the nearest relation, yes, in the world. I am entitled to know all his dearest concerns. But you are not entitled to know mine, nor will such behaviour as this ever induce me to be explicit. Let me be rightly understood. This match to which you have the presumption to aspire can never take place, no, never. Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Now what have you to say? Only this, that if he is so, you can have no reason to suppose he will make an offer to me. Lady Catherine hesitated for a moment and then replied, the engagement between them is of a peculiar kind. From their infancy they have been intended for each other. 'Twas the favoured wish of his mother as well as of hers. Well, in their cradles we planned the union, and now at a moment when the wishes of both sisters will be accomplished in their marriage, to be offended by a young woman of inferior birth, of no importance in the world, and wholly an ally to the family. Do you pay no regard to the wishes of his friends, to his tacit engagement with Mr. Burrough? Are you lost to every feeling of propriety and delicacy? Have you not heard me say that from his earliest hours he was destined for his cousin? Yes, and I had heard it before, but what is that to me? If there is no other objection to my marrying your nephew, I shall certainly not be kept from it, by knowing that his mother and aunt wished him to marry Mr. Burrough. You both did as much as you could in planning the marriage. Its completion depended on others. If Mr. Darcy is neither by honour nor inclination confined to his cousin, why is not he to make another choice? And if I am that choice, why may not I accept him? Because honour, decorum, prudence, nay, interest forbid it. Yes, Miss Bennet, interest, for do not expect to be noticed by his family or friends, if you wilfully act against the inclinations of all. You will be censured, slighted, and despised by everyone connected with him. Your alliance will be a disgrace, Your name will never even be mentioned by any of us. These are heavy misfortunes, replied Elizabeth, but the wife of Mr. Darcy must have such extraordinary sources of happiness necessarily attached to her situation that she could, upon the whole, have no cause to repine. Obstinate, headstrong girl, I am ashamed of you. Is this your gratitude for my attentions to you last spring? Is nothing due to me on that score? Let us sit down. You are to understand, Miss Bennet, that I came here with a determined... What? Sorry, that was still Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Let us sit down. You are to understand, Miss Bennet, that I came here with a determined resolution of carrying my purpose, nor will I be dissuaded from it. I have not been used to submit to any person's whims. I have not been in the habit of broking disappointment. That will make your ladyship's situation at present more pitiable, but it will have no effect on me. I will not be interrupted. Hear me in silence. My daughter and my nephew are formed for each other. They are descended on the maternal side from the same noble line, and on the father's from respectable, honourable and ancient, though entitled families. Their fortune on both sides is splendid. They are destined for each other by the voice of every member of their respective houses, and what is to define them? The upstart pretensions of a young woman without family, connections or fortune. Is this to be endured? But it must not, shall not be. If you were sensible of your own good, you would not wish to go this sphere in which you have been brought up. And the that low pitch. I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well as well. Glad to have catched some of your streams lately. It's been great fun. I'm usually working during the time though, so I think a couple of times I've just lurked and not said a thing. Or I did speak up once, if I remember correctly at least. Hope you're doing well. In marrying your nephew, I should not consider myself as quitting that sphere. He is a gentleman, I am a gentleman's daughter. So far we are equal. True, you are a gentleman's daughter, but who is your mother? Who are your uncles and aunts? Do not imagine me ignorant of their condition. Whatever my connections may be, said Elizabeth, if your nephew doesn't object to them, they can mean nothing to you. Tell me once for all, are you engaged to him? Though Elizabeth would not, for the mere purpose of obliging Lady Catherine, have answered this question, she could not but say after a moment's deliberation, I am not. Lady Catherine seemed pleased. Oh, no worries, man. Glad to give you a shout out. Loving your ASMR. Oh, no worries. I try to get around and hang around a bit. Just chill around with people sometimes as well in Twitch chats. Don't always have the time, unfortunately. And will you promise me never to enter into such an engagement? I will make no promise of the kind. Miss Bennet, I am shocked and astonished. I expected to find a more reasonable young woman, but do not deceive yourself into a belief that I will ever recede. I shall not go away till you have given me the assurance I require. Hey, I'm back still. Doing well, doing well. How are you doing? And I certainly shall never give it. I'm not to be intimidated into anything so wholly unreasonable. Your ladyship wants Mr. Darcy to marry your daughter, but would my giving you the wished-for promise make their marriage at all more probable? Supposing him to be attached to me, would my refusing to accept his hand make him wish to bestow on his cousin? Allow me to say, Lady Catherine, that the arguments with which you have supported this extraordinary application have been as frivolous as the application was ill-judged. You have widely mistaken my character, if you think I can be worked on by such persuasions as these. How far your nephew might approve of your interference in his affairs, I cannot tell, but you have certainly no right to concern yourself in mine, and must beg, therefore, to be importuned no farther on the subject. Not so hasty, if you please. I have by no means done. To all the objections I have already urged, I have still one other to add. I am no stranger to the particulars of your youngest sister's infamous elopement. I know it all that the young man's marrying her was a patched-up business at the expense of your father and uncles, and is such a girl to be my nephew's sister, as her husband is the son of his late father's steward, to be his brother. Heaven and earth, of what are you thinking? Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted? You can now have nothing farther to say. She resentfully answered. You have insulted me in every possible method. I must beg to return to the house. And she rose as she spoke. Lady Catherine rose also, and I turned back. Her ladyship was highly incensed. Glad to hear it, Bextil, glad to hear it. Hope you're ready for some catfights. It's getting a bit rowdy in the book. You have no regard, then, for the honour and credit of my nephew, unfeeling a selfish girl. Do you not consider that a connection with you must disgrace him in the eyes of everybody? Lady Catherine, I have nothing further to say. You know my sentiments. You are not resolved to heaven. I have said no such thing. I am only resolved to act in that manner which will, in my own opinion, constitute my own happiness, without reference to you, or to any person so wholly unconnected with me. It is well, you refuse then to oblige me. You refuse to obey the claims of duty, honour, and gratitude. You are determined to ruin him in the opinion of all his friends, and make him the contempt of the world. Neither duty nor honour nor gratitude, replied Elizabeth, have any possible claim on me in the present instance. No principle of either would be violated by my marriage with Mr. Darcy, and with regard to the resentment of his family or the indignation of the world, if the former were excited by his marrying me, it would not give me one moment's concern, and the world in general would have too much sense to join in this quarrel. And this is your real opinion, this is your final resolve. Very well, I shall now know how to act. Do not imagine, Miss Bennet, that your ambition will ever be gratified. I came to try you, I hope to find you reasonable, but depend upon it, I will carry my point. In this manner Lady Catherine talked on, till they were at the door of the carriage, when turning hastily round she added, I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. I send no compliments to your mother. You deserve no such attention. I am most seriously displeased. Elizabeth made no answer, and without attempting to persuade her ladyship to return to the house, walked quietly into it herself. She heard the carriage drive away as she proceeded upstairs. Her mother impatiently met her at the door of the dressing-room to ask why Lady Catherine would not come in again and dress herself. She did not choose it, said her daughter. She would go. She is a very fine-looking woman, and her calling here was prodigiously civil, for she only came, I suppose, to tell us the Collinses were well. She is on a road somewhere, I dare say, and so passing through Meryton, thought she might as well call on you. I suppose you had nothing particular to say to you, Lizzie. Elizabeth was forced to give in to a little falsehood here, for to acknowledge the substance of their conversation was impossible. All right. Chapter 57, going pretty quick. Let me jump in there in a sec. If I remember correctly, there are 61 chapters in this book. So we're really near the end now, although we already were. I just couldn't finish it this week, or last week. Unfortunately. And I'm a bit late on trying to finish it now, unfortunately, as well. But oh well. Let's read on. The discomposure of spirits which this extraordinary visit threw Elizabeth into could not be easily overcome, nor could she for many hours learn to think of it less than incessantly. Lady Catherine, it appeared, had actually taken the trouble of this journey from Rosings for the sole purpose of breaking off her supposed engagement with Mr. Darcy. It was a rational scheme, to be sure, but from what the report of their engagement could originate, Elizabeth was at a loss to imagine, though she recollected this being the intimate friend of Bingley, and her being the sister of Jane, was enough at a time when the expectation of one wedding made everybody eager for another to supply the idea. She had not herself forgotten to feel that the marriage of her sister must bring them more frequently together. And their neighbour at Lucas Lodge, therefore, for through their communication with the Collinses, the report she concluded had reached Lady Catherine. Her only set that down as almost certain and immediate, which she had looked forward to as possible at some future time. In revolving Lady Catherine's expressions, however, she could not help feeling some uneasiness as to the possible consequence of her persisting in their interference. From what she had said of her resolution to prevent their marriage, it occurred to Elizabeth that she must meditate an application to her nephew, and how he might take a similar representation of the evils attached to a connection with her. She dared not pronounce she knew not the exact degree of his affection for his aunt, or his dependence on her judgment, than she could do, and it was certain that enumerating the miseries of a marriage with one whose immediate connections were so unequal to his own, his aunt would address him on his weakest side. With his notions of dignity, he would probably feel that the arguments, which to Elizabeth had appeared weak and ridiculous, contained much good sense and solid reasoning. If he had been wavering before as to what he should do, which had often seemed likely, the advice and entreaty of so near a relation might settle every doubt and determine him at once to be as happy as dignity and unblemished could make him. In that case he would return no more. Lady Catherine might see him in her way through town, and his engagement to Bingley, if coming and Netherfield must give way. If therefore an excuse for not keeping his promises should come to his friend within a few days, she added, I shall know how to understand it. I shall then give over every expectation, every wish of his constancy. If he is satisfied with only regretting me, when he might have obtained my affection and hand, I shall soon cease to regret them all. At all. The next morning, as she was going downstairs, she was met by her father, who came out of his library with a letter in his hands. Lizzie, said he, I was going to look for you. Come into my room. She followed him thither, and her curiosity to know what he had to tell her was heightened by the supposition of its being in some manner connected with the leathery hound. It suddenly struck her that it might be from Lady Catherine, and she anticipated with dismay all her consequent explanations. Hello there, Saint. Aren't ya to be sleeping sometime soon? Alright, sure, Saint. Let me actually just do that right now then. I think we're actually at some good point to take a bit of a break. What would you want? A random card out of the deck, or a certain number from the top or bottom? Off random shuffling, that is. As I struggled to get the cards out of the box it in. Hope it wasn't too loud. You might be able to hear shuffling a bit better now, actually. Haven't done it with the new mic stand mic position yet. Although the shuffling is now behind the mic, it is on a more plain level with it. I'm not entirely sure of the polar pattern of the mic out of my head. I know it's either cardioid or hypercardioid, so behind it isn't the greyness, but at the same level might be better than quite a bit under it. Or well, might pick it up more. Which whether that's better is to be debated. Alright. Let me see for a lovely scene there. That's the... I'm trying to show it well. There you go. Actually pretty well. Did I think the Five of Swords, right? Wrong way around, but yeah. The Five of Swords. Not quite sure what I just make of the art. Not good or bad per se. It does have, I think, are those horns? Those might be two horns. Let's ask the book, since the book knows. Maybe no drama again. Who knows? I don't know what to say, Saint. Either the arcane I don't really like, or you're not having the greatest time of your life. The Five of Swords. Self-destruction. Yet another card of warning. The Five of Swords depicts the destruction of the self. You'll be lured into another situation or argument you know to avoid. Your selfishness and desire for power will lead you to defeat pain, and discord will result. To be fair, you'll be lured into another situation or argument you know to avoid. I'm just saying, well, interpret it whichever way you feel it might apply to you. Trying to look where I'm putting everything down. There you go. A cluttered desk, and it's not even cluttered with either martingales, it's just cluttered with all my work stuff. You haven't had a good car yet, Ian. I mean, if you're feeling lucky, we can do a second card real quick. For free. A reconciliation of that card not being all too great. Thing is though, if you're doing the second card in hopes of maybe getting something a bit better, it's not quite guaranteed, is it? Could just as well get something just as bad or just as warning of a card. But hey, in the end, the card was only a warning. It wasn't anything bad yet. Oh, I was gonna do that one for free, Saint, don't you worry. I'll refund that one and do that one for free. Not that I have much to do with channel points, but sure enough. Let's see what else the Arcana have next to that warning. I gotta set up some more channel point redemptions sometime. Let's see, maybe I could do something like you've got. I think you've got for like a certain big amount, right, that you can save up for to get a gift sub. Heart of the cards, Saint. Heart of the cards. Also, I kinda did see the self-destruction in the last one, by the way. I already shoveled it away now, but the swords and the kind of severed horns was kind of alluring to that, I suppose. Anyways, yeah. This is a different card. I don't know the meaning out of my head, but it's a Three of Swords. And, I mean, they've got some lovely red, like, bindings around them. But the swords also have blood dripping off them. And they're cool and ornated swords, but I'm not really feeling good vibes from the Arcana here either. Oh, it isn't a suit per se, by the way, that is like bad or good. Far as I know. It's more the suits are about a certain topic-ish. Where were swords? Here are swords. Well, you never know, maybe this is what the other card was warning about. The Three of Swords. Betrayal, heartbreak, turmoil. A dark and complex card. The Three of Swords is rarely a welcome sight. Its wrath may come in the form of lies, betrayal, cheating, or heartbreak. There will be emotional entanglement and confusion. Do not try to make any decisions while in this state. Wait for your heart and spirit to mend. The Arcana just doesn't think you're going to get a rosy and nice future, apparently, Saint. Or maybe you've just got a lot to be warned about. It's all mainly about advice anyways. Who knows, Saint, who knows? But alright. Let me jump back into Pride and Prejudice now. Mr. Bennet was about to show Elizabeth or Lizzie a letter. She followed him thither, and her curiosity to know what he had to tell her was heightened by the supposition of its being in some manner connected with the letter he held. It suddenly struck her that it might be from Lady Catherine, and she anticipated with dismay all the consequent explanation. She followed her father to the fireplace, and they both sat down. He then said, "I have received a letter this morning that has astonished me exceedingly, as it principally concerns yourself. You ought to know its contents. I did not know before that I had 2 daughters on the brink of matrimony. Let me congratulate you on a very important conquest." The colour now rushed into Elizabeth's cheeks, and the instantaneous conviction of it being a letter from a nephew instead of the aunt, and she was determined whether most to be pleased that he explained himself at all, or offended that his letter was not rather addressed to herself, when her father continued, "You look conscious. Young ladies have great penetration in such matters as these, but I think I may defy even your sagacity to discover the name of your admirer. This letter is from Mr. Collins." "From Mr. Collins? And what can he have to say?" "Something very much to the purpose, of course. He begins with congratulations on the approaching nuptials of my eldest daughter, of which it seems he has been told by some of the good-natured gossiping lucres. I shall not sport with your impatience by reading what he says on that point. What relates to yourself is as follows. Having thus offered you the sincere congratulations of Mrs. Collins of another, and myself on this happy event, let me now add a short hint on the subject of another, of which we have been advertised by the same authority. Your daughter Elizabeth, it is presumed, will not long bear the name of Bennet, after her elder sister has resigned it, and the chosen partner of her fate may be reasonably looked up to as one of the most illustrious personages in this land. Can you possibly guess, Lizzie, who is meant by this? This young gentleman is blessed in a peculiar way with everything the heart of mortal can most desire: splendid property, noble kindred, and extensive patronage. Yet in spite of all these temptations, let me warn my cousin Elizabeth and yourself of what evils you may incur by a precipitate closure with the gentleman's proposal, which of course you will be inclined to take immediate advantage of. Have you any idea, Lizzie, who this gentleman is? But now it comes out. My motive for cautioning you is as follows. You have reason to imagine that his Aunt Lady Catherine de Burgh does not look on the match with a friendly eye. Mr. Darcy, you see, is the man. Now, Lizzie, I think I have surprised you. Could he or Lucas have pitched on any man within the circle of our acquaintance, whose name would have given the lie more effectually to what they related? Mr. Darcy, who never looks at any woman but to see a blemish, and who probably never looked at you in his life. It is admirable. Probably should have added a capellars in, or at least a mini one. Elizabeth tried to join in her father's pleasantry, but could only force one most reluctant smile. Never had his wit been directed in a manner so little agreeable to her. Are you not diverted? Oh yes, pray read on. Let me just read the rest of the letter as is being read aloud by Mr. Bennet, just in the middle here. After mentioning the likelihood of this marriage to her ladyship last night, she immediately, with her usual condescension, expressed what she felt on the occasion, when it became apparent that on the score of some family objections on the part of my cousin, she would never give her consent to what she termed so disgraceful a match. I thought it my duty to give the speediest intelligence of this to my cousin, that she and her noble admirer may be aware of what they are about, and not run hastily into a marriage. Which has not been properly sanctioned. Mr. Collins, moreover, adds, I am truly rejoiced that my cousin Lydia's sad business has been so well hushed up, and am only concerned that their living together before the marriage took place should be so generally known. I must not, however, neglect the duties of my station, or refrain from declaring my amazement at hearing that you received a young couple into your house as soon as they were married. It was an encouragement to fight, and had I been the rector of Longbourn, I should very strenuously have opposed it. You ought certainly to forgive them as a Christian, but never to admit them in your sight, or allow their names to be mentioned in your hearing. Alright, that's the end of the letter reading. Now Mr. Bennet's actually talking, so I swap on back to the left. That is his notion of Christian forgiveness. The rest of his letter is only about his dear Charlotte's situation. And well, and his expectation of a young olive branch. But Lizzie, you look as if you did not enjoy it. You are not going to be missish, I hope, and pretend to be affronted as an idle report. For what do we live but to make sport for our neighbours, and laugh at them in their turn? Oh, cried Elizabeth, I am excessively diverted, but it is so strange. Hello there, Ecliptic, hope you're doing well. Good day, good day. And hold on. Yes, that is what makes it amusing. Had I fixed on any other man, it would have been nothing. But his perfect indifference and your pointed dislike make it so delightfully absurd. Much as I abominate writing, I wouldn't give up Mr. Collins's correspondence for any consideration. Nay, when I read a letter of his, I cannot help giving him the preference even over Wickham, much as I value the impudence and hypocrisy of my son-in-law. And pray, Lizzie, what said Lady Catherine about his report? Did she call to refuse her consent? To this question his daughter replied only with a laugh, and that it had been asked without the least suspicion. She was not distressed by this repeating it. Elizabeth had never been more at a loss to make her feelings appear what they were not. It was necessary to laugh when she would rather have cried. Her father had most cruelly mortified her by what he said of Mr. Darcy's indifference, and she could do nothing but wonder at such a want of penetration, or fear that perhaps, instead of his seeing too little, she might have fancied too much. And alright, let me just jump straight on and further on. Chapter 58. Instead of receiving any such letters of excuse from his friend as Elizabeth half expected Mr. Bingley to do, he was able to bring Darcy with him to Longbourn before many days had passed after Lady Catherine's visit. The gentleman arrived early, and before Mrs. Bennet had time to tell him of their having seen his aunt, of which her daughter sat in momentary dread, Bingley, who wanted to be alone with Jane, proposed their all walking out. It was agreed to. Mrs. Bennet was not in the habit of walking. Mary could never spare time, but the remaining 5 set off together. Bingley and Jane, however, soon allowed the others to outstrip them. They lagged behind while Elizabeth, Kitty and Darcy were to entertain each other. Very little was said by either. Kitty was too much afraid of him to talk. Elizabeth was secretly forming a desperate resolution, and perhaps she might be doing the same. Sorry about the meowing, by the way. I was not too annoying and background sound. I've got a cat that probably wants into my room, just for attention and warmth. Probably it's pretty warm in there. They like the heat. She's normally not allowed there, so we're gonna try that today, sticking to our guns. Not allowed in this room since she likes to claw everything up. They walked towards the Lucases because Kitty wished to call upon Maria, and as Elizabeth saw no occasion for making it a general concern, when Kitty left for them, she went boldly on with him alone. Now was the moment for her resolution to be executed, and while her courage was high, she immediately set the door. Hello, McMahons, and right, I didn't move. Could always quickly swap back. I don't know which one people prefer. This one might be a bit cozier. Well, we've been on this one all day. And hello, Israel. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for the follow. But whilst walking, she said, Mr. Darcy, I'm a very selfish creature, and for the sake of giving relief to my own feelings, care not how much I may be wounding yours, I can no longer help thanking you for your unexampled kindness to my poor sister. Ever since I have known it, I have been most anxious to acknowledge to you how gratefully I feel it, Were it known to the rest of my family, I should not have merely my own gratitude to express. I am sorry, exceedingly sorry, replied Darcy in a tone of surprise and emotion, that you have ever been informed of what may, in a mistaken light, have given you uneasiness. I did not think Mrs. Gardner was so little to be trusted. You must not blame my aunt. Lydia's thoughtlessness first betrayed to me that you had been concerned in the matter, and of course I could not rest till I knew the particulars. Let me thank you again and again in the name of all my family for that generous compassion which induced you to take so much trouble and bear so many mortifications for the sake of discovering them. If you will thank me, he replied, let it be for yourself alone, that the wish of giving happiness to you might add force to the other inducements which led me on. I should not attempt to deny, but your family owe me nothing. Much as I respect them, I believe, I thought only of you. Elizabeth was too much embarrassed to say a word. After a short pause, her companion narrated, you are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on this subject forever. Elizabeth, feeling all the more in common awkwardness and anxiety of the situation, now forced herself to speak, and immediately, though not very fluently, gave him to understand that her sentiments had undergone so material a change since the period to which she alluded as to make her receive with gratitude and pleasure his present assurances. The happiness which his reply produced was such as he had probably never felt before, and he expressed himself on the occasion as sensibly and as warmly as a man violently in love can be supposed to do. Had Elizabeth been able to encounter his eye, she might have seen how well the expression of heartfelt delight diffused over his face became him. But though she could not look, she could listen, and he told her of feelings which, in proving of what importance she was to him, made his affection every moment more valuable. They walked on without knowing in what direction. There was too much to be thought and felt and said for attention to any other object. She soon learned they were indebted for her present good understanding to the efforts of his aunt, who did call on him in their return through London, and there relate her journey to Longbourn, its motive and the substance of her conversation with Elizabeth, dwelling empathetically on every expression of the letter, which, in her ladyship's apprehension, peculiarly denoted a perverseness and assurance, in the belief that such a relation must assist her endeavours to obtain that promise from her nephew which she had refused to give. But unluckily for her ladyship, its effect had been exactly contrariwise. It taught me to hope, said he, as I had scarcely ever allowed myself to hope before. I knew enough of your disposition to be certain that, had you been absolutely, irrevocably decided against me, you would have acknowledged it to Lady Catherine frankly and openly. Elizabeth coloured and laughed as she replied, yes, you know of my frankness to believe me capable of that. after abusing you so abominably to your face, I would have no scruple in abusing you to all your relations. What did you say of me that I did not deserve? For though your accusations were unfounded, formed on mistaken premises, my behaviour to you at the time had merited the severest reproof. It was unpardonable. I cannot think of it without abhorrence. We will not quarrel for the greater share of blame annexed to that even, said Elizabeth. The conduct of neither, if strictly examined, will be irreproachable, but since we have both, I hope, improved in civility, I cannot be so easily reconciled to myself. The recollection of what I then said, of my conduct, my manners, my expressions during the whole of it, is now, and has been many months, inexpressibly painful to me. Your reproof so well applied, I shall never forget. Had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner, those were your words. You know not, you can scarcely conceive how they have tortured me. Though it was some time, I confess, before I was reasonable enough to allow their justice. I was certainly very far from expecting them to make so strong an impression. I had not the smallest idea of their being ever felt in such a way. I can easily believe it. You thought me then devoid of every proper feeling. I am sure you did. The turn of your countenance I shall never forget, as you said that I could not have addressed you in any possible way that would induce you to accept me. Oh, do not repeat what I then said. These recollections will not do at all. I assure you that I have long been most heartily ashamed of it. Darcy mentioned this letter. Did it, said he, did it soon make you think better of me? Did you, on reading it, give any credit to its contents? She explained what its effect on her had been, and how gradually all her former prejudices had been removed. I knew, said he, that what I wrote must give you pain, but it wasn't necessary. I hope you have destroyed the letter. There was one part especially, the opening of it, which I should dread your having the power of reading again. I can remember some expressions which might justly make you hate me. The letter shall certainly be burned, if you believe it essential to the preservation of my regards. But though we have both reason to think my opinions not entirely unalterable, they are not, I hope, quite so easily changed as that implies. When I wrote that letter, replied Darcy, I believed myself perfectly calm and cool, but I am since convinced that it was written in a dreadful bitterness of spirit. Oh, my cat probably doesn't speak human, but I told her no. For those yeah, no, she's meowing still. Quieter now, so you know what, I'll take that. Thank you, Emo Cynic, thank you very much. Glad it's calming. Alright, I'll give her some attention, that's what she wants. She's not allowed in this room, but it's not really working for ASMR with her meowing in the background, is it? Alright. Think je pijkant and well. She kind of grumpy and grandma. Then again, it's just us two in the house. It's fair that she wants some attention. She's not quite so used to being alone in the house when I'm up here. The letter perhaps began in bitterness, but it did not end so. The adieu is charity itself, but think no more of the letter. The feelings of the person who wrote and the person who received it are now so widely different from what they were then, that every unpleasant circumstance attending it ought to be forgotten. You must learn some of my philosophy. Think only of the past as its remembrance gives you pleasure. I cannot give you credit for any philosophy of the kind. Your retrospections must be so totally void of reproach that the contentment arising from them is not a philosophy, but what is much better, of ignorance. But with me it is not so. Painful recollections will intrude, which ought not imprint, to be repelled. I have been a selfish being all my life, in practice though not in principle. As a child I wish I was taught I was right, but I was not taught to correct my temper. I was given good principles, but left to follow them in pride and conceit. Unfortunately an only son, for many years an only child, I was spoiled by my parents, who though with themselves, my father particularly, all that was benevolent and amiable allowed, encouraged almost, taught me to be selfish and overbearing, to care for none beyond my own family circle, to think meanly of all the rest of the world, to wish at least to think was from A to A, to wish at least to think meanly of their sense and worth compared with my own. Such I was from A to 28, and such I might still have been but for you, dearest, loveliest Elizabeth. What do I not owe you? You've thought me less than hard indeed, at first, but most advantageous. By you I was properly humbled. I came to you without doubt of my reception. You showed me how insufficient were all my pretensions to please a woman worthy of being pleased. Had you then persuaded yourself that I should? Indeed I had. What will you think of my family, of my vanity? I believe you to be wishing, expecting my address. And the law their sake, by the way, hope you're doing well. My manners must have been in fault, but unintentionally I assure you. I never meant to deceive you, but my spirits might often lead me wrong. How you must have hated me after that evening. Hate you, I was angry perhaps at first, but my anger soon began to take a proper direction. Dora. There we go. Can't miss that. Wait, let me put that there again. I'm almost afraid of asking what you thought of me when... That is Mr. Darcy, actually, not Elizabeth. I'm almost afraid of asking what you thought of me when we met at Pemberley. You blame me for coming. Though indeed I felt nothing but surprise. Actually, I'm not sure who was speaking anymore. Would be neither they. I did actually incidentally swap them. Oh, and thank you for the follow, you cynic. Okay, so the last one, that question, was Elizabeth. You put them back in the proper places, as I have them. Your surprise would not be greater than mine in being noticed by you. My conscience told me that I deserved no extraordinary politeness, and I confess that I did not expect to receive more than my due. My object, then, replied Darcy, was to show you by every civility in my power that I was not so mean as to resent the past, that I hope to obtain your forgiveness, to lessen your ill opinion, by letting you see that your reproofs have been attended to. How soon any other wishes introduce themselves, I can hardly tell, but I believe in about half an hour after I had seen you. He then told her of Georgina's delight in her acquaintance, and of her disappointment at its sudden interruption, which naturally leading to the cause of that interruption, she soon learned that this resolution of following her from Derbyshire in quest of her sister had been formed before he quitted the inn, and that his gravity and thoughtfulness there had arisen from no other struggles than what such a purpose must comprehend. She expressed her gratitude again, but was too painful a subject to each to be dwelt on farther. After walking several miles in a leisurely manner, and too busy to know anything about it, they found at last, on examining their watches, that it was time to be at home. What would become of Mr. Bingley and Jane was a wonder which introduced a discussion of their affairs. Darcy was delighted with their engagement. His friend had given him the earliest information of it. "I must ask whether you were surprised," said Elizabeth. "Not at all. When I went away I felt that it would happen soon. That is to say, you had given your permission, I guessed as much." And though he exclaimed at the term, she found that it had been pretty much the case. "On the evening before my going to London," said he, "I made a confession to him which I believe I ought to have made long ago. I told him of all that had occurred to make my former interference in his affairs absurd and impertinent. His surprise was great. He had never had the slightest suspicion. I told him, moreover, that I believed myself mistaken in supposing, as I had done, that your sister was indifferent to him, and as I could easily perceive that his attachment to her was unabated, I felt no doubt of their happiness together." Elizabeth could not help smiling at his easy manner of directing his friend. "Did you speak from your own observation," said she, "when you told him that my sister loved him, or merely from the information last spring?" "From the former. I had narrowly observed her during the 2 visits which I had lately made her here, and I was convinced of her affection." "And your assurance of it, I suppose, carried immediate conviction to him?" "It did. Bingley is most unaffectedly modest. His difference had prevented his depending on his own judgment in so anxious a case, but his reliance on mine made everything easy. I was obliged to confess one thing. Which for a time, and not unjustly, offended him. I could not allow myself to conceal that your sister had been in town 3 months last winter, that I had known it, and purposely kept it from him. He was angry, but his anger, I am persuaded, lasted no longer than he remained, and ain't doubt of your sister's sentiments. He has heartily forgiven me now. Nice, Saint, nice. Sleep well. Have a great night's rest. You deserve it. Elizabeth longed to observe that Mr. Bingley had been a most delightful friend, so easily guided that his worth was infallible, but she checked herself. She remembered he had yet to learn to be laughed at, and it was rather too early to begin. In anticipating the happiness of Bingley, which of course was to be inferior only to his own, he continued the conversation till they reached the house. In the hall they parted. Alright, quick breather. I'm actually catching a bit small of a break now in between chapters. Sorry to just leave you half asleep here, but we got a quick break and thank you, Saint. I don't know how long either. Finishing the book up at least, which will be an hour or so. And actually I can't go much longer than that. You know why. But maybe like 30 minutes after that. But yeah, let me quickly take a quick break. And then we'll jump into chapter 59. I was going to say 29 there, but we're quite a bit farther than that. Let me see. It's readable-ish there. I'll leave it there, I think. So I'll be back in a sec. Calendar Judy and Jade. Or well, I don't know, just helping out a friend. Many a friend and that. See you all in a bit. Hello, hello. Just mess with the volume of the fire again. And hello, Luna both. Thank you for the follow. And thank you, listening. Had a quick little break. And thank you, Big Steel. And alright. I have to always go up and down a flight of stairs for my breaks and the likes. And you know what they say, the age-old saying, of course. I think it's from ancient Greece, from some time ago. Find yourself a partner who looks at or who is breathtaking to you as going upstairs. Quite like the saying. It's quite a good saying. Anyhow, my breath and senses return to me. Let me jump into chapter 59. Only 3 chapters left then, I think. Getting real close to the end of the book. My dear Lizzie, where can you have been walking to? Was a question which Elizabeth received from Jane as soon as she had entered the room, and from all the others when they sat down to table. She had only to say in reply that they had wandered about till she was beyond their own knowledge. She coloured as she spoke, but neither that nor anything else awakened the suspicion of the truth. Hello there, but thank you for the follow. Hope you're doing well. Welcome, welcome. The evening passed quietly, unmarked by anything extraordinary. The acknowledged lovers talked and laughed. The unacknowledged were silent. Darcy was not of a disposition in which happiness overflows in mirth, and Elizabeth, agitated and confused, rather knew that she was happy, than felt herself to be so, for, besides the immediate embarrassment, there were other evils before her. She anticipated what would be felt in the family when her situation became known. She was aware that no one liked him but Jane, and even feared that with the others it was a dislike which not always fortune and consequence might do away. At night she opened her heart to Jane, though suspicion was very far from Miss Bennet's general habits. She was absolutely incredulous here. You are not joking, Lizzie. This cannot be. Engaged to Mr. Darcy. No, no, you shall not deceive me. I know it to be impossible. This is a wretched beginning indeed. My sole dependence was on you, and I am sure nobody else will leave me if you do not. Yet indeed I am in earnest. I speak nothing but the truth. He still loves me, and we are engaged. Jane looked at her doubtingly. Oh, Lizzie, it cannot be. I know how much you dislike him. You know nothing of the matter. That is all to be forgot. Perhaps I did not always love him so well as I do now, but in such cases as these, a good memory is unpardonable. This is the last time I shall ever remember it myself. Miss Bennet still looked all amazement. Elizabeth again, and more seriously assured her of its truth. Good heaven, can it be really so? Yet now I must believe you, cried Jane. My dear, dear Lizzie, I would. I do congratulate you, but are you certain, forgive the question, are you quite certain that you can be happy with him? And hey, Janjo, thank you for the follow. Thank you very much. Hope you're doing well. There can be no doubt of that. It is settled between us already that we were to be the happiest couple in the world. But are you pleased, Jane? Shall you like to have such a brother? Very, very much. Nothing could give either Bingley or myself more delight, but we consider it. We talked of it as impossible, and do you really love him quite well enough? Oh, Lizzie, do anything rather than marry without affection. Are you quite sure that you feel what you want to do? Oh, yes. You will only think I feel more than I ought to do when I tell you all. What do you mean? Why, I must confess that I love him better than I do Bingley. I'm afraid you will be angry. My dearest sister, now be serious. I want to talk very seriously. Let me know everything that I am to know without delay. Will you tell me how long you have loved him? It has been coming on so gradually that I hardly know when it began. But I believe I must date it from my first seeing his beautiful grounds at Pemberley. Another entreaty that she would be serious, however, produced the desired effect, and she soon satisfied Jane by her solemn assurances of attachment. When convinced on that article, Miss Bennet had nothing farther to wish. Hello, Ruin. Thank you for the follow. Hope you're doing well. Much love to you. Oh, I'm quite happy, said she, for you will be as happy as myself. I always had a value for him, were it for nothing but his love of you. I must always have esteemed him, but now as Bingley's friend and your husband. There can be only Bingley and yourself more dear to me. But Lizzie, you have been very sly, very reserved with me. How little did you tell me of what passed at Pemberley and Lambton? I owe all that I know of it to another, not to you. Elizabeth thought of the motives of her secrecy. She had been unwilling to mention Bingley, and the unsettled state of her own feelings had made her equally avoid the name of his friend. But now she would no longer conceal from her his share in Lydia's marriage. All was acknowledged, and half the night spent in conversation. And hello there, Lord Sinks. Hope you're doing well. Much love to you as well. Good gracious, cried Mrs. Bennet as she stood at the window the next morning. If the disagreeable Mr. Darcy is not coming here again with our dear Bingley, what can he mean by being so tiresome as to be always coming here? I had no notion but he would go a-shooting or something or other, and not disturb us with his company. What shall we do with him, Lizzie? You must walk out with him again, that he may not be in Bingley's way. Elizabeth could hardly help laughing at so convenient a proposal, yet was really vexed that her mother should be always giving him such an epithet. As soon as they entered, Bingley looked at her so expressively, and shook hands with such warmth, as left no doubt of his good information, and he soon afterwards said aloud, Mr. Bennet, have you no more lanes hereabout, in which Lizzie may lose her way again today? I advise Mr. Darcy and Lizzie and Kitty, said Mrs. Bennet, to walk to Oakham Mount this morning. It is a nice long walk, and Mr. Darcy has never seen the view. It may do very well for the others, replied Mr. Bingley, but I am sure it will be too much for Kitty, won't it, Kitty? Kitty owned that she had rather stay at home. Darcy professed a great curiosity to see the view from the mount, and Elizabeth silently consented. As she went upstairs to get ready, Mrs. Bennet followed her, saying, "I'm quite sorry, Lizzie, but you should be forced to have the disagreeable man all to yourself. But I hope you will not mind it. It is all for Jane's sake, you know, and there is no occasion for talking to him, except just now and then. So do not put yourself to inconvenience." During their walk, it was resolved that Mr. Bennet's consent should be asked. In the course of the evening, Elizabeth reserved to herself the application for her mother's. She could not determine how her mother would take it, sometimes doubting whether all his wealth and grandeur would be enough to overcome her abhorrence of the man. But whether she were finally set against the match, or violently delighted with it, it was certain that her manner would be equally ill adapted to do credit to her sense, and she could no more bear that Mr. Darcy should hear the first raptures of her joy than the first vehemence of her disapprobation. In the evening, soon after Mr. Bennet withdrew to the library, she saw Mr. Darcy arise also, and follow him, and her agitation on seeing it was extreme. She did not fear her father's opposition, but he was going to be mere unhappy. Rather it should be through her means that she, his favourite child, should be distressing him by her choice, should be filling him with fears and regrets, and disposing of her was a wretched reflection. And she sat in misery till Mr. Darcy appeared again, when looking at him, she was a little relieved by a smile. In a few minutes he approached the table where she was sitting with Kitty, and while pretending to admire her work, said in a whisper, "Go to your father, he wants you in the library." And she was gone directly. Her father was walking about the room, looking grave and anxious. "Lizzie," said he, "what are you doing? Are you out of your senses to be accepting this man? Have not you always hated him?" How earnestly did she then wish that her former opinions had been more reasonable, her expressions more moderate. It would have spared her from explanations and professions which it was exceedingly awkward to give. But they were now necessary, and she assured him with some confusion of her attachment to Mr. Darcy. Or, in other words, you are determined to have him. He is rich, to be sure, and you may have more fine clothes and fine carriages than Jane, but will they make you happy? Have you any other objection, said Elizabeth, do you believe of my indifference? None at all. We all know him to be a proud and pleasant sort of man, but this would be nothing if you really liked him. I do like him, she replied with tears in her eyes. I love him indeed. He has no improper pride. He is perfectly amiable. You do not know what he really is. Then pray do not pain me by speaking of him in such terms. Lizzie, said her father, I have given him my consent. He is the kind of man indeed to whom I should never dare refuse anything which he condescended to ask. I now give it to you, if you are resolved on having him. But let me advise you to think better of it. I know your disposition, Lizzie. I know that you could be neither happy nor respectable unless you truly esteemed your husband, unless you looked up to him as superior. Your lively talents would place you in the greatest danger in an unequal marriage. You could scarcely escape discredit and misery. My child, let me not have the grief of seeing you unable to respect your partner in life. You know not what you are about. Elizabeth, still more affected, was earnest and solemn in her reply, and at length, by repeated assurances that Mr. Darcy was really the object of her choice, by explaining the gradual change which her estimation of him had undergone, relating her absolute certainty that his affection was not the work of a day, but it stood the test of many months' suspense, and enumerating with energy all his good qualities, she did not conquer her father's incredulity and reconcile him to the match. And although their son, thank you for following up your room well, and thank you for giving me hydrate. Well, my dear, said he, when she ceased speaking, I have no more to say. If it has been a case he deserves you, I couldn't have parted with you, my Lizzie, to anyone less worthy. To complete the favourable impression, she then told him what Mr. Darcy had voluntarily done for Lydia. He heard her with astonishment. This an evening of wonders indeed, and so Darcy did everything, made up the match, gave him money, paid the fellow's debts, and got him his commission. So much the better, it will save me a world of trouble and economy. Had it been your uncle's doing, I must and would have paid in, but these violent young lovers carry everything their own way. I shall offer to pay him tomorrow. He will rant and storm about his love for you, and there will be an end of the matter. He then recollected her embarrassment a few days before, on his reading Mr. Collins's letter, and after laughing at her some time, allowed her at last to go, saying as she quitted the room, If any young men come from Mary or Kitty, send them in, for I am quite at leisure. Elizabeth's mind was now relieved from a very heavy weight, and after half an hour's quiet reflection in her own room, she was able to join the others with tolerable composure. Everything was too recent for gaiety, but the evening passed tranquilly away. There was no longer anything material to be dreaded, and the comfort of ease and familiarity would come in time. When her mother went up to her dressing room at night, she followed her and made the important communication. Its effect was most extraordinary, for on first hearing it, Mrs. Bennet sat quite still, and unable to utter a syllable, nor was it under many, many minutes that she could comprehend what she heard, though not in general backward to credit what was for the advantage of her family, or that came in the shape of a lover to any of them. She began at length to recover, to fidget about in her chair, get up, sit down again, wonder and bless herself. Good gracious, Lord bless me, only think, dear me, Mr. Darcy, who would have thought it, and is it really true, oh my sweetest Lizzie? How rich and how great you will be, what pin money, what jewels, what carriages you will have. Jane's is nothing to it, nothing at all. I am so pleased, so happy, such a charming man, so handsome, so tall. Oh, my dear Lizzie, pray apologize for my having disliked him so much before. I hope he will overlook it. Dear, dear Lizzie, a house in town, everything that is charming, 3 daughters married, 10,000 a year, oh Lord, what will become of me? I shall go distracted. This was enough to prove that her approbation need not be doubted, and Elizabeth, rejoicing that such an effusion was heard, only by herself soon went away. But before she had been 3 minutes in her own room, her mother followed her. My dearest child, she cried, I can think of nothing else than 10,000 a year, and very likely more. 'Tis as good as a lord and a special license. You must and shall be married by a special license. But my dearest love, tell me, what dish Mr. Darcy is particularly fond of, that I may have it tomorrow. This was a sad omen of what a mother's behaviour to the gentleman himself might be, and Elizabeth found that though, in the certain possession of his warmest affection, and secure of her relations' consent, there was still something to be wished for. But the morrow passed off much better than she expected, for Mrs. Bennet luckily stood in such awe of her intended son-in-law, that she ventured not to speak to him unless it was in her power to offer him any attention or mark her deference for his opinion. Elizabeth had the satisfaction of seeing her father taking pains to get acquainted with him, and Mr. Bennet soon assured her that he was rising every hour in his esteem. "I admire all my 3 sons-in-law highly," said he. "Wickham perhaps is my favourite, but I think I shall like your husband quite as well as James. And hey, miss, hope you're doing well. Guessing you may be off for sleep soon, and if so, sleep well. Although it is the weekend, so maybe not. Unless you're still on your normal pattern of going to sleep at 7 a.m. Then I'll be quiet a bit. And all right. Chapter 60. I think we're near the end. Getting pretty close. Elizabeth's spirits soon rising to playfulness again. She wanted Mr. Darcy to account for his having ever fallen in love with her. "How could you begin?" said she. "I can comprehend your going on charmingly, when you had once made a beginning, but what could set you off in the first place? I cannot fix on the hour or the spot or the look or the word which laid the foundation. It is too long ago. I was in the middle before I knew that I had begun. My beauty was early withstood, and as for my manners, my behaviour to you was at least always bordering on the uncivil, and I never spoke to you without a rather wishing to give you pain than not. Now be sincere that you admire me for my impertinence. For the liveliness of your mind I did. You may as well call it impertinence at once. It was very little less. The fact is that you are sick of civility, of deference, of officious attention. You are disgusted with the women who are always speaking and looking, and thinking for your approbation alone. I aroused and interested you, because I was so unlike them. Had you not been really amiable, you would have hated me for it. But in spite of the pains you took to disguise yourself, your feelings were always noble and just, and in your heart you thoroughly despised the persons who so assiduously courted you. There, I have saved you the trouble of accounting for it, and really, all things considered, I begin to think it perfectly reasonable. To be sure you know the mutual good of me, but nobody thinks of that when they fall in love. Was there no good in your affectionate behaviour to Jane, while she was ill with Netherfield? There is Jane who could have done less for her. But make a virtue of it by all means. My good qualities are under your protection, and you are to accentuate them as much as possible, and in return it belongs to me to find occasions for teasing and quarrelling with you as often as may be, and I shall begin directly. by asking what made you so unwilling to come to the point at last. What made you so shy of me when you first called and afterwards deigned here? Why especially when you called did you look as if you didn't care about me? Because you were grave and silent and gave me no encouragement. But I was embarrassed, and so was I. You might have talked to me more when you came to dinner. A man who had felt less might. How unlucky that you should have a reasonable answer to give, that I should be so reasonable as to admit it. But I wonder how long you would have gone on if you had been left to yourself. I wonder when you would have spoken if I had not asked you. My resolution of thanking you for your kindness to Lydia had certainly great effect. Too much, I am afraid, for what becomes of the morrow, if our comfort springs from a breach of promise, for I ought not to have mentioned the subject. This will never do. You need not distress yourself. The moral will be perfectly fair. Lady Catherine's unjustifiable endeavours to separate us were a means of removing all my doubts. I am not indebted for my present happiness to your eager desire of expressing your gratitude. I was not in a humour to wait for any opening of yours. My aunt's intelligence had given me hope, and I was determined at once to know everything. Lady Catherine has been of infinite use, which ought to make her happy, for she loves to be of use. But tell me, what did you come down to Netherfield for? Was it merely to write to Longbourn and be embarrassed, or had you intended any more serious consequence? My real purpose was to see you and to judge, if I could, whether I might ever hope to make you love me. My avowed one of what I avowed to myself was to see whether your sister were still partial to Bingley, and if she were to make a confession to him, which I have since made. Shall you ever have courage to announce to Lady Catherine what is to befall her? I am more likely to want time than courage, Elizabeth, but it ought to be done, and if you will give me a sheet of paper, it shall be done directly. And if I had not a letter to write myself, I might sit by you, and admire the eagerness of your writing, as another young lady once did. But I have an aunt, too, who must not be longer neglected. From an unwillingness to confess how much her intimacy with Mr. Darcy had been overrated, Elizabeth had never yet answered Mrs. Gardiner's long letter, but now, having that to communicate, which she knew would be most welcome, she was almost ashamed to find that her uncle and aunt had already lost 3 days of happiness, and immediately wrote as follows. I would have thanked you before, my dear aunt, as I ought to have done for your long, kind, satisfactory detail of particulars, but to say the truth, I was too cross to write. I supposed more than I really existed, but now suppose as much as I choose, you will lose to your fancy. Indulge your imagination in every possible flight which the subject will afford, and unless you believe me actually married, you cannot greatly err. You must read again very soon and praise him a great deal more than you did in your last. I thank you again and again for not going to the lakes. How could I be so silly as to wish it? Your idea of the ponies is delightful. We will go around the park every day, and I am the happiest creature in the world. Perhaps all the people have said so before, but not one with such justice. I am happier even than Jane. She only smiles, I laugh. Mr. Darcy sends you all the love in the world that he can spare from me. You are all to come to Pemberley at Christmas. signed yours, etc. Mr. Darcy's letter to Lady Catherine was in a different style, and still different from either was what Mr. Bennet sent to Mr. Collins in reply to his last. Dear Sir, I must trouble you once more for congratulations. Elizabeth will soon be the wife of Mr. Darcy. Console Lady Catherine as well as you can, but if I were you I would stand by the nephew. He has more to give. Signed yours sincerely, etc. Miss Bingley's congratulations to her brother on his approaching marriage were all that was affectionate and insincere. She wrote even to Jane on the occasion to express her delight and repeat all her former professions of regard. Jane was not deceived, but she was affected, and though feeling no reliance on her, could not help writing her a much kinder answer than she knew was deserved. The joy which Miss Darcy expressed on receiving similar information was as sincere as her brother's in sending it. 4 sides of paper were insufficient to contain all her delight, and all her earnest of desire of being loved by her sister. Before any answer could arrive from Mr. Collins, or any congratulations to Elizabeth from his wife, the Longbourn family word that the Collinses were come themselves to Lucas Lodge. The reason of the sudden removal was soon evident. Lady Catherine had been rendered so exceedingly angry by the contents of her nephew's letter that Charlotte, really rejoicing in the match, was anxious to get away till the storm was blown over. At such a moment the arrival of her friend was a sincere pleasure to Elizabeth, though in the course of their meetings she must sometimes think she pleasure dearly bought, when she saw Darcy exposed to all the parading and obsequious civility of her husband. He bore it, however, with admirable calmness. He could even listen to Sir William Lucas when he complimented him on carrying away the brightest jewel of the country, and expressed his hopes of their all meeting frequently at St. James's, with very decent composure. If he did shrug his shoulders, it was not till Sir William was out of sight. Mrs. Phillips's vulgarity was another, and perhaps a greater tax on his forbearance, and though Mrs. Phillips as well as her sister stood in too much awe of him to speak with a familiarity which Bingley's good humour encouraged, yet whenever she did speak she must be vulgar, nor was her respect for him, though it made her more quiet, at all likely to make her more elegant. Elizabeth did all she could to shield him from the frequent dodges of either, and was ever anxious to keep him to herself, and to those of her family with whom he might converse without mortification, and though the uncomfortable feelings arising from all this took from the season of courtship much of its pleasure, it added to the hope of the future, and she looked forward with delight to the time when he should be removed from society so little pleasing to either, to all the comfort and elegance of their family party at Pemberley. And all right, I think we're at the last chapter of this book. Let me take a quick break. Let me see, it is the last chapter, isn't it? Yes, it is. It ain't too long, but let me quickly take a breather and drink a bit. I miss some stuff, it seems. Past is the past, and I can't keep an eye on everything whilst streaming. Let me jump in the final chapter of the story. Let's wrap it up. The story is. Maybe stream a bit more, but we'll see. Happy for all the maternal feelings was the day on which Mrs. Bennet got rid of her two most deserving daughters. With what delighted pride she afterwards visited Mrs. Bingley and talked of Mr. Darcy may be guessed. I wish I could say, for the sake of her family, that the accomplishment of her earnest desire in the establishment of so many of her children produced so happy an effect as to make her sensible, amiable, well-informed woman for the rest of her life. Though perhaps it was lucky for her husband, who might not have relished domestic felicity in so unusual a form, that she still was occasionally nervous and invariably silly. Mr. Bennet missed his second daughter exceedingly. His affection for her drew him oftener from home than anything else could do. He delighted in going to Pemberley, especially when it was at least expected. Mr. Bingley and Jane remained at Netherfield only a 12-month. So near a vicinity to her mother and Meryton, relations was not desirable, even to his easy temper or her affectionate heart. The darling wish of his sister was then gratified. He bought an estate in a neighbouring county to Derbyshire, and Jane and Elizabeth, in addition to every other source of happiness, were within 30 miles of each other. Kitty, to her very material advantage, spent the chief of her time with her two other sisters, in society so superior to what she had generally known. Her improvement was great. She was not of so ungovernable a temper as Lydia, and removed from the influence of Lydia's example, she became, by proper attention and management, less irritable, less ignorant, and less insipid. From the farthest advantage of Lydia's society, she was of course carefully kept, and though Mrs. Wickham frequently invited her to come and stay with her, with the promise of balls and young men, her father would never consent to her going. So, hold on. Sorry for pausing again. Alright. Sorry. Saying sorry for saying sorry. Get going. It isn't that kind of evening, it seems. Anyhow, as for Wickham and Lydia, their characters suffered no revolution from the marriage of her sisters. He bore with philosophy the conviction that Elizabeth must now become acquainted with whatever of his ingratitude and falsehood had before been unknown to her, and in spite of everything was not wholly without hope that Darcy might yet be prevailed on to make his fortune. The congratulatory letter which Elizabeth received from Lydia on her marriage explained to her that, by his wife at least, if not by himself, such a hope was cherished. The letter was to this effect. My dear Lizzie, I wish you joy if you love Mr. Darcy half as well as I do, my dear Wickham. You must be very happy. It is a great comfort to have you so rich, and when you have nothing else to do. I hope you will think of us. I am sure Wickham would like a place at court very much, and I do not think we shall have quite some money enough to live upon without some help. Any place would do of about 300 or 400 a year, but however, do not speak to Mr. Darcy about it, if you had rather not. Signed yours, etc. As it happened that Elizabeth had much rather not, she endeavoured in her answer to put an end to every entreaty and expectation of the kind, such a relief, however, as it was in her power to afford, by the practice of what might be called economy in her own private expenses. She frequently sent them. It had always been evident to her that such an income as theirs under the direction of two persons, so extravagant in their wants and heedless of the future, must be very insufficient to their support. And whenever they changed their quarters, either Jane or herself were sure of being applied to for some little assistance towards discharging their bills. Their manner of living, even when the restoration of peace was dismissed them to a home, was unsettled in the extreme. They were always moving from place to place in a quest of a cheap situation, and always spending more than they ought. His affection for her soon sunk into indifference. Hers lasted a little longer, and in spite of her youth and manners, she retained all the claims to reputation which her marriage had given her. Though Darcy could never receive a hymn at Pemberley yet, for Elizabeth's sake, he assisted with him farther in his profession. Lydia was occasionally a visitor there, when her husband was gone to enjoy himself in London or Bath, and with the Bingley they both of them frequently stayed so long that even Bingley's good humour was overcome, and he proceeded so far as to talk of giving them a hint to be gone. Sorry about that. Miss Bingley was very deeply mortified about Darcy's marriage, but as she thought it advisable to retain the right of visiting at Pemberley, she dropped all resentment, was fonder than ever of Georgiana, almost as tentative to Darcy as heretofore, and paid off every arrear of civility to Elizabeth. Pemberley was now Georgiana's house, and the attachment of the sisters was exactly what Darcy had hoped to see. They were able to love each other, even as well as they intended. Georgiana had the highest opinion in the world of Elizabeth, though at first she often listened with an astonishment bordering on alarm at her lively, sportive manner of talking to her brother. He who had always inspired in herself a respect which almost overcame her affection. She now saw the object of open pleasantry. Her mind received knowledge which had never before fallen in her way. By Elizabeth's instructions, she began to comprehend that a woman may take liberties with her husband, which a brother will not always allow in a sister more than 10 years younger than himself. Lady Catherine was extremely indignant on the marriage of her nephew, and as she gave way to all the genuine frankness of her character, in a reply to the letter which announced its arrangement, she sent him language so very abusive, especially of Elizabeth, that for some time all intercourse was at an end. But at length, by Elizabeth's persuasion, he was prevailed on to overlook the offence and seek a reconciliation, and after a little farther to overlook the offence, and after a little farther assistance on the part of his aunt, her resentment gave way, either to her affection for him or her curiosity to see how his wife conducted herself, and she condescended to wait on them at Pemberley, in spite of that pollution which his woods had received, not merely from the presence of such a mistress, but a visit of her uncle and aunt from the city. With the Gardiners, they were always on the most intimate terms. Darcy, as well as Elizabeth, really loved them, and they were both ever sensible of the warmest gratitude towards the persons who, by bringing her into Derbyshire, had been the means of uniting them. And book. I must say I quite enjoyed Pride and Prejudice. A lot of you all may not have heard all too much of it. But it was a good book, Although I don't know, I do have a couple of things to remark upon it as well. It also was lovely and showed some nuances of a lot of things. I feel like the ending chapters were maybe a bit more rushed. I don't know. What the story is supposed to be about Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy getting together and all the likes. Well, the book definitely is about that. It definitely had a lot of other stuff in the middle as well, just floating about. And I don't know, I feel like Jane Austen might have been quite busy with that, and ended up maybe leaving out some more interesting parts in the end. Felt like she needed to wrap it up. Or she could have gone a bit more in depth into Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. But I don't know, that's how in no way, shape or form a proper book reviewer. That's just kind of my 2 cents on it. And alright, it's been a very quiet day. Let me Just see real quick. That's the end of Pride and Prejudice, the book. I don't really know if I wanna maybe look to some short stories or the likes for a bit. Or something. To just fill up a little bit more time. Let me see. For that I would have to find some nice short stories though. I've been through quite a lot already as well. You know what though? This looks nice. Poetry by James Weldon Johnson. Don't know the name, but looks fun. Let's see. Let's just jump in there. Give a bit of a look at this poetry. Hello, Redux. Hope you're doing well. Much love to you. Alright, hearing and feeling my stomach there. Probably won't do too much poetry before I end stream in a bit. But just a couple of pieces of poetry. I'm quite looking forward to my dinner. I haven't eaten too much today. But alright, a piece of poetry by James Weldon Johnson. Lift a free voice and sing. Lift a free voice and sing till the earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, highest the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rot, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat, ever on our weary feet, come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come threading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places our God where we met Thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Interesting piece, pretty nice actually, I quite liked it. Quite nice, quite nice. So hey, that one's pretty long, maybe not that one. So hey, if there's any Americans listening actually, good afternoon to you probably by now. Or maybe good afternoon in an hour, depends. But at the very least, a nice little poem called To America. Sounds good. It might be intended as travel to America, not as like intended for America. I don't know, we'll see. To America, how would you have us as we are, or sinking neath the load we bear? our eyes fixed forward on a star, or gazing empty at despair, rising or falling men of things, with dragging pace or footsteps fleet, strong willing sinews in your wings, or tightening chains about your feet. We may do a bit longer one, and then I think I'll end it off there for today. O black and unknown bards, O black and unknown bards of long ago, how came your lips to touch the sacred fire? How in your darkness did you come to know the power and the beauty of the minstrel's lyre? Who first whom from midst his bonds lifted his eyes? Who first from out the still watch lone and long, feeling the ancient faith of prophets rise, within his dark kept soul burst into song? Hard-road slave poured out such melody, a still way to Jesus on its strains. His spirit must have nightly floated free, though still about his hands he felt his chains. Who heard grey Jordan roll, who starward high saw chariots swing low? And who was he that breathed that comforting melodic sigh? Nobody knows the trouble I see. What merely living clot, what captive thing, could up toward God through all its darkness grope, and find within its deadened heart to sing these songs of sorrow, love, and faith, and hope? How did it catch that subtle undertone, that note in music heard not with ears? How sound the elusive reed so seldom blown, which stirs the soul or melts the heart to tears? Not that great German master in his dream of harmonies that thundered among the stars, had the creation ever heard a theme nobler than go round Moses market's bars? How like a mighty trumpet call they stir the blood, such are the notes that men have sung, going to Felder's deeds such tones there were, that helped make history when time was young. There is a wide, wide wonder in it all, that from the graded rest and servile toil, the fiery spirit and the seer should call these simple children of the sun and soil. Oh, slave singers gone, forgotten, famed, you alone of all the things long line, of those of song and thought unknown and tamed, have stretched out upward seeking divine. You sang not deeds of heroes or of kings, no chant of bloody war, no exulting pain, of arms won triumphs but your humble strings, you touched in chord with music empyrean. You sang far better than you knew the songs that for your listeners' hungry hearts sufficed, still live but more than this to you belongs. You sang a race from wood and stone to Christ. Alright, let me see. I'll maybe just do 2 short ones, and then read you on over to the lovely J up the room, J up the human. Well, speaking is hard sometimes. To Horace Bumstead. Have you been sore discouraged in the fight, and even sometimes weighted by the thought that those at whom and those for whom you fought left far behind or dared but faintly smite, and that the opposing forces in their might of blind inertia rendered as for naught what had throughout the long years had been wrought, and powerless each blow for truth and right. If so, take new and greater courage then, and think no more without an help you stand. For sure as God on his eternal throne sits mindful of the sinful needs of men, the awful sword of justice in his hand, you shall not know, you shall not fight alone. Autumn. And then one last one. Sure, why not? The colour sergeant on an incident at the Battle of San Juan Hill. Under a burning tropic sun, with comrades around him lying, a trooper of the sable 10th lay wounded, bleeding, dying. First in the charge of the fort crowned hill, his company's Chiron bearing, he had rushed where the leaden hill fell fast, not death nor danger fearing. He fell in the front where the fight grew fierce, still faithful in life's last labour, black though his skin, yet as hard as true as the steel of his blood-stained sabre. And while the battle around him rolled like the roar of a sullen breaker, he closed his eyes on the bloody scene and presented arms to his Maker. There he lay without honour or rank, but still in a grim-like beauty, despised of men for his humble race, yet true in death to his duty. Right. Think that'll end it off for today for me. A nice chill Friday. Guess it's true what I say. Taking a bit of a break can lower your numbers again when coming back. Hope you all enjoyed. Hope you're all nice and relaxed, feeding off the relaxation. And let me just search up my stream manager and reach you all on over to the lovely J-Rob the Human. Let me turn on my audio. And then once again, thank you all for having been here. Take care, take care. Much love to you all. And see you all some other time. I'll be live more this weekend. I will. So maybe see you all then. If not, some other time. Have a great, great weekend to all. Take care. And I need to wear